Okay, letting people in.
Welcome, everybody. I hope, please introduce yourself when you come in, as you come in, and tell us where you're joining from on the chat. You can also tell us how you feel about your climate journey using an emoji. And we'll wait maybe 30 more seconds to get everybody in. Okay, I think we're ready to start. We have the recording on, right, Bertusha? Perfect. Welcome to our first success stories of 2024. It's a popular work on climate community event series that features our community members and their journey to climate jobs. We're very excited to have everybody slowly coming in. My name is Monica Leska, and I'm joining from New Orleans, Louisiana in the United States. I have two colleagues of mine from Work on Climate volunteer team, Shua and Pretusha, who are helping with the event today. And we are part of a larger volunteer team with Work on Climate, whose mission is to support people to transition to climate jobs or make their job a climate job. And Work on Climate does that by connecting people through global Slack community with over 20,000 members, offers climate expert hours, produces series of events focused on climate workforce. So if one of you may be interested in supporting us and becoming a volunteer as well, please check out our website where we have a lot of resources and also application for that. And I just want everybody to know that we will share the slideshow with the resources and recording of the event after through the email that you signed up. So just know that everything that we'll be sharing today, you will also receive hopefully tomorrow via email. And just briefly introduce you to the format of this event. We have 5 amazing speakers who are representing different stages of their career and transitions that happen at different stages of their career from different sectors and different geographic locations. So we're very happy to have this diversity in their backgrounds. And we'll have 5 speakers kind of talk about their journey and share their resources and success story for 5 minutes. We'll have some time after each speaker to ask quick questions. So if anybody from the audience would like to ask questions, just please raise your hand, use the emoji to raise your hand, and I will call you out so you can ask a question directly to the speaker. And we'll just have a few minutes for that. But please, I will be kind of reviewing who has questions, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. This is supposed to be kind of like lightning talks, quick 5 minutes for a presentation and 5 minutes for questions from the audience. And after we have 5 speakers presenting their stories, we will break out into rooms with each speaker, and you will have more opportunity to connect with the speaker, ask more questions, and questions either about their journey or their current climate job, or any other relevant topics that you want to discuss. You'll be able to move from each room to another room and listen to multiple speakers. We hope to have 20 or 25 minutes for that. And at the end, we will welcome back everybody for a quick share of insights from the event or from the breakout room, or any wrap-up notes that we have. We would also want you to participate in a group photo at the end, and we would love if you would give us a feedback as well through our quick poll for the event. And before we start, just want to mention that we have a call for speaker application available on our website. You will also see a link to that in our chat. So if you know anybody who would like to speak or who would like to share their story, or maybe people in the audience who would want to become speakers, please consider applying for that. Our speakers today were also selected from an application process like that. So we are ready to start. Let me introduce our first speaker, who is Laura Fletcher. She's joining us from Cambridge, Massachusetts. She works as a product director for clean energy software, Uplight. And I think, Laura, this is already her third climate job. She just transitioned to another one in the meantime. So congratulations on that. And please welcome you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I would actually love to turn to the participants and say thank you so much for wanting to transition into climate. This is the great crisis of our time, and we need every mind that we can on working to solve it. So thank you for your commitment to doing this. It is hard. It is really, really hard right now. So I'll give a very quick version. My past roles were I had a former life in public education, transitioned into tech and product, and then wended my way through a number of different product roles at organizations that were everywhere from tiny 3-person startups to giant anonymous tech behemoths of 30,000 people. I transitioned into I transitioned into climate a few years ago. And I transitioned in at a very different time in the market. This was a time when the market was really on the up and up. Climate technology was also on the up and up. I transparently had a relatively easy time finding opportunities in climate tech. And I call this out because I think that is a massive transition from then until now. In that time, the market has tanked. And I think at the same time, interest in roles in climate tech has radically increased. And so actually, if we can switch to the next slide here. Thank you. I want to highlight a couple of barriers that I think those who are seeking roles in climate right now might face. The first one around the current market, that was not a barrier that I faced, but it is a barrier that I now observe from the other side. I want to be very clear, the market right now in tech generally, and in climate tech specifically, is a dumpster fire that is floating down a river of flaming trash that is coursing through a warming world. So if you are putting applications out there and you are hearing nothing back, I want you to know that that is a factor of the market and not of you. However, in order to overcome that kind of barrier, there is a really, really, really useful way to do it. It's just not everybody's favorite way of doing things. Not at all to sort of scare anyone, but to give you a picture of what folks on the other side are facing. So folks who are receiving applications are facing. In a previous role, we had an open product director or product designer role that received 800 applications in a week. And so, you know, when you're thinking about the perspective of the people coordinator who's trying to sift through those applications, they have got to make use of some kind of filtering mechanism. That's not necessarily great for equity. It's not necessarily great for building a diverse workplace. But at the end of the day, if a trusted colleague points at a resume in that pile and says, hey, I know this person, or I talked to this person, or I used to work with this person, you should look at them. The practical reality of the situation is that that is a really, really useful filtering mechanism. And so networking is the best working. And if you are interested in a particular role, do not just send in your resume. It will end up in a pile with hundreds of others. You've got to do your best to try and network your way to speaking to someone at the company. That is thankfully something that anyone can do. LinkedIn exists, make use of it, reach out to your colleagues, to your friends, find out if they know anyone who knows anyone, etc. The second barrier that I wanted to mention is this idea of experience in the climate or the energy space. I'm going to speak just about product for right now because I don't have quite as much visibility into other kinds of roles and where experience in this in the past really falls. But what I can tell you is that there is a range of perspectives on this, but my perspective as a hiring manager of product managers into this space is that just like every other industry, it is learnable. It is learnable. What is harder to learn and harder to teach are really great product skill sets. Product skill sets are transferable, but industry knowledge is learnable. And so if you have a great sort of skill set in a certain area, but you don't necessarily have climate or energy experience, I would not consider that a barrier. It might be for certain hiring managers, but there are plenty of us out there who really care that you are good at your craft, and we trust that you're going to be able to learn the industry. I know I'm running low on time, so I'll skip quickly to my resources. Let's go to the next slide. Great. These are lists of the places that I looked at to find roles in climate. And again, once I recognized that there was a role available, I did not apply directly. I went to LinkedIn. I tried to see if there was anyone who I knew at that company, anyone who knew someone at that company, and do my best to network towards being able to actually speak to someone there. In terms of opportunities to learn the industry, there are a couple of newsletters that I follow. Mostly now I just wish that I were reading them rather than actually reading them, but there is some really great content in those that I listed. There are tons and tons and tons of them out there. Those just happen to be the ones that I'm on. And I think that's everything. Again, thank you for your commitment to solving this enormous crisis, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you so much. That was really great. Thank you for this insight. So let's see if we have any questions from the audience. Okay, I see Lisa, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi Laura, thank you. I'm wondering when you transitioned and when you think it became more challenging to do so. I got a green MBA in August of 09, so less than a year after the bottom of the market dropped out. So I'm wondering if you're referring to since then or that time period.
No, very much since then. I was transitioning between 21 and 22. So really began the search towards the end of 21, got my first role towards the beginning of 22. And so even in just that short amount of time, I think things have really, really changed. The way I would think about it is, it's a supply and demand problem. And there's been an enormous increase in the amount of sort of supply of folks who are exceptionally talented and exceptionally committed to transitioning into climate, which from a good things for the world perspective, that's amazing. But from a demand perspective, the technologies in climate that can support that volume of interest just haven't accelerated at the same rate. So that's how we have this like glut of really brilliant, really talented people, like all of yourselves in this room, who are trying very hard to transition into an industry that feels like it should need more people. But at the moment, it's tough.
Do you see that changing anytime soon?
I think the trends in climate technology are going to track the overall trends in the tech market. And so until that part of the world re-accelerates, I don't know that there's an immediate reduction in challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa and Laura. And Chase, let's go on to your question.
Yes, hi. First off, thank you to all the speakers for being here. We appreciate your time. So I've sat in on several of a lot of the seminars in the last couple of days, and I keep hearing to reach out to people that might be hiring for the roles directly. One question I've had, and I haven't been able to ask it, so I think this. Thank you all, but you're only you're limited to how many emails or direct messages you can send on a place like LinkedIn. Are cold emails considered all right? Like, do people respond to those? I'm just kind of wondering if we, only have so many messages that we can send. And obviously, being new in a space, I don't, I'm only so connected. I don't necessarily have a bunch of people that I know that are in the space at this moment. So just trying to, build my way into that. I'd appreciate an answer. Thank you.
It's a really great question, Chase, and I appreciate the specificity of it too. I think that my response is going to be a little bit nuanced, which is I have been incredibly lucky in my career to have so many people support me, and have had, many people who I have reached out to cold in the past say, sure, with usually some connection. Maybe we share an alumni network, maybe we are in the same place, except maybe we have someone in common. And so my instinct in these cases is always to say, like, anyone who reaches out to me, I am so grateful for the opportunity to pay it forward, and support someone else in their career growth. But again, sort of turning back to the practical reality of the situation right now, I am so grateful for the opportunity to do that when the volume is a manageable one. And what I've observed for myself in just the past, I would say 6 months to a year, is that volume has transitioned from being manageable to unmanageable. And I'm now finding that straight up cold messages on LinkedIn or cold emails, I just don't have the capacity to respond to in the way that I really wish I did. And so, I would say, see if there are other ways to leverage your past experiences. Again, if you have alumni networks, those are great places to look for connections. If you have worked in past roles, those are great places to look for connections. But again, this is going to vary person to person. At the moment, I'm struggling to sort of filter through who I can and can't respond to, just given the demands of my own job and my, desire to support others in their career. That's in some tension right now, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we have to move to the next speaker, but I know there are more questions, but please join Laura in her breakout room and you'll be able to directly ask those questions. Thank you so much, Laura. And let's move on to Louis Chan, who is joining us from Singapore, where he works as a sustainability manager at Golden Energy and Resources. Welcome, Louis.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Work on Climate team, for having me here today. So as Monica mentioned, I'm working as the sustainability manager for a company in Singapore called Golden Energy and Resources. So what we do, we are an investment holding company, specifically looking at mining, not the Bitcoin mining, but more the physical commodities sort of mining. And what I do in my role is basically to lead the just transition and also balancing the environmental and societal impact without overly focusing on just the environmental impact alone. And I just wanted to echo what Laura said. I think networking is extremely important, and you should not just do it when you need to find a job. I think that any event you go to, even when you step out of your house, whoever you meet, I think if you can actually strike a connection with them and interact with them, they will remember you. And if you ever need their help in the future, I think they will definitely help. And I think more importantly, when I network with people, I think what is more important is what can I contribute to them and not so much of what I can take from them. So I think with that sort of mindset, you go into different conversation, not feeling guilty about they're trying to make advantage of anyone, but they're willing to contribute your time and effort first. And in the future, if you need any help from them, I'm sure they'll be willing to help. So how I structure these slides on this right-hand side is about the current trends. I think it's important that when we go and network, when we interact with people, especially from Asia Pacific, because some issues in sustainability, maybe they're more pertinent in Asia Pacific region. So I think it's important to know what are some critical things we have to consider, and therefore know the nuances between, let's say, Asia Pacific, EU, US, Africa, etc. So I think the first point I wanted to share briefly is on the idea of just transition, is that companies or countries can't just shift completely or remove the carbon intensive industry from a economy. I think we have to also consider the societal elements, ensuring that the workers in certain hard to abate sectors are well equipped and well prepared as we move towards a cleaner society. That's the first point. Second point I thought is really important, at least in my career, is on sustainability reporting, not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but also understanding the why behind it. And when we collect the data, I think what is more important is not just the numbers when we reflect in our report, but also what can we do to actually reduce or to improve the numbers. So I think sustainability reporting actually provides us or me a lens to understanding the business better, and therefore looking at the ES and G factors and how we can improve them. Thirdly, very quickly, is on social equity. I think whenever there's different policies or rollout plans being implemented, I think we have to understand and analyze which part of the society is not being looked after or is being disadvantaged by certain policies, and therefore addressing it, which I can elaborate more later on. And lastly, I think the idea of carbon credits, because I work in the corporate sustainability space, I think there's this big issue about carbon credits, the legitimacy of them. I'm of the view that it should not be the first line. I think that it can be used as a last line if you really cannot reduce or eliminate any carbon. But I think that we have to also drill in on whether the carbon credits that if we are going to use is truly credible and reliable, and whether there are any standards based on it. So moving on to the next slide, I wanted to also quickly share some ecosystem barriers that I face, or that individuals may actually face. The first of which is the complex nature of the Asia Pacific region for sustainability, because Asia Pacific is a region with a lot of potential, especially from biodiversity potential and the carbon abatement potential. But I think it's so complicated because there's so many different jurisdictions with their own governmental policies that it's not really centralized. So I think therefore it is important when we work in particular Asia Pacific countries or collaborate with them, I think to understand firstly what is the governmental views or regulations when it comes to that. Secondly, I think in Asia Pacific, there's a lot of mining or hard to abate sectors, which is mining, agriculture, and real estate. I think as I shared earlier, we have to move, I personally move away from the idea that we have to completely stop financing them, but we have to guide them to transit towards a more sustainable future. And thirdly, similar to what Lova mentioned, I believe, is on the idea of climate tech. I think in my space, there are a lot of climate tech, but the issue is that there may not be enough funding given to them. For example, I think the VC and PE funding actually decline in general, but also specifically for climate tech. And that will hinder the growth of climate tech because they are hence not able to actually be implemented in countries or in companies at the pilot stage. And if companies don't see that the climate tech is being used at the pilot stage, I'm sure they wouldn't trust to actually purchase or use the technology at scale. So therefore, I think the funding issue has to be resolved. And lastly, for this slide is my proven strategies on what I believe might work. So first of which is to have a holistic perspective towards sustainability. A lot of us just focus on the environmental or just the climate side, but I think, for example, biodiversity, social equity, human rights, diversity issues all have to be considered and taken into account for. That's what I think personally. Secondly, I think is to be realistic and optimistic about where and how things can go forward, not giving a too idealistic point of view that we just need to be completely green or totally net zero by 2030, for example, but how can we get there in a more sustainable and achievable manner while not contributing too much harm to other aspects of a company. And lastly, is to have a systematic checklist on key criteria when assessing technologies. This is what I did because when I assess carbon abatement or carbon removal or carbon reduction technologies for mining, I look at certain criteria that I look out for to ensure that there's a business case for why and how we need to implement those technologies. So these are this slide. And the last slide here that I have is on the key resources that I found useful personally from a corporate sustainability and sustainable finance perspective. On the left-hand side are reporting frameworks for those of you who may be new into sustainability or climate or who wants to transition to this field. I think these standards provide the fundamental understanding of what are some material factors that companies actually are concerned about and therefore addressing them. The second part in this slide is on broad tools, IPCC reports, IEA reports, and World Resources Institute. There are many more out there, but I think these reports provide a very fundamental, foundational understanding on how the scenarios of the future might be and how it should be if we actually do not improve our sustainability efforts. And lastly, from a financial point of view, these are 3 sources that I found quite useful. There are many more out there. If anyone wishes to have more resources or know more about the Asia Pacific region, which I think is can be focused on, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll reply to all the messages or questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you so much. And just a reminder, if you have a question for Louis right now, please raise your hand and I will call you out. But I can also start with one question. So Louis, I know that you have background, your academic background is not in sustainability, and you did pivot early in your career to climate. And I was wondering if whenever you were searching, for the climate jobs, did you have to prove, your not having that academic background to your employers, or did you have to give your climate story, how that conversations were going when you were looking for jobs in terms of not having that background? Was that a barrier, or or did it matter to your employees in any way?
Sure, thank you. Yes, my background wasn't in sustainability. I came from a quite different pharmacy background, so that was my degree. I think, was there any challenges to getting a sustainability or climate job? I think yes. I think initially yes, there would be, because I didn't come from an environmental science background or business background, which most of my peers would actually come from. But I think it's to position your pharmacy degree, if assuming you have it, is that how can it actually benefit or allow you to actually do better in sustainability. And what I did and I found quite transferable is the research skills and analytical skills in pharmacy, because there's a lot of papers you have to read, a lot of pharmacodynamics that you have to understand. So it's quite translatable to sustainability, because I believe that sustainability and climate is actually a science as much as it is a business and an art. So I think, how do you position it? And also to volunteer. I think if you have the passion for sustainability, you naturally want to volunteer. And if you naturally volunteer, I think your employers can actually see it. You should not force yourself to do it, because employers can actually sense it out pretty fast if you're just faking it. But if you truly believe in what you're doing and have a good background, then I think you can just go and apply for all the sustainability jobs and try to position yourself to what benefits the employer, because after all, they are paying you the salary. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're a little delayed, so let's move on to the next speaker. Thank you, Louis, for being here. And if you have more questions, please join his breakout room. And we are welcoming now Anshul Gupta, who is joining us from New York City, where he's a policy and research director at New Yorkers for Clean Power. Hello, Anshul.
Hello, good afternoon. I am actually in Westchester County, north of New York City. And as Monica mentioned, I'm currently the Policy and Research Director at New Yorkers for Clean Power, approaching my 1-year anniversary with this nonprofit organization. My background is in computer science. In high performance computing. I started working for IBM Research in 1995, and after a 28-year research career, decided to make this transition into the climate space. So a very sort of a very different transition story, and I had been volunteering with climate organizations for a long time, and what helped me sort of make this decision was the realization that we have all this great technology. Renewables are generally less expensive than fossil fuels, but why isn't anything moving? And the biggest hurdle right now in the energy transition is not the cost, not the technology, it's the regulatory and legislative hurdles that are preventing the transition. In New York State, in particular, our homes and buildings are the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. About 40% of New York State's emissions come from homes and buildings burning fossil fuels in buildings, like burning gas for heating. But this 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 entire space is highly regulated. The Public Service Commission pretty much decides what fuels we use. So no matter what how great sort of we are in the technology space, none of those technologies are actually going to be deployed because the fossil fuel industry spends billions of dollars in lobbying and disinformation campaigns and just scaring the public as well as the legislators, uh, and essentially telling them that our electrical grid, for example, cannot handle the load of heat pumps and things like that. So could we could move to the next slide. Uh, so I was sort of asked to talk about the barriers that I faced in the transition, which was surprisingly that I didn't face any barriers except the fact that working in climate policy and research is something which you will not get compensated at the levels at which you might get compensated in the tech space, which works well for me because this was a retirement gig for me, and I didn't mind taking a 3x or 4x pay cut. But other than that, there is always demand in the space. I had no problem transitioning, so I will sort of focus on some of the barriers that the energy transition actually faces, which we sort of all need to work towards. And the number one, of course, is the oil and gas industry's massive, well-funded lobbying and public disinformation campaigns. With the tech background, I actually found it easy to enter this space because our legislators who don't have a STEM background, they are bombarded with conflicting information from various special interests, and they don't know who to believe. So they would find me, based on my background, more credible. And I also act as a BS sniffer. For example, if a gas utility tells a legislator, hey, we can't switch to heat pumps because the electrical grid is going to fail, we don't have enough grid capacity, uh, I can quickly sort of run the numbers and communicate and translate uh, sort of jargon and STEM and tech into plain English for the legislators. Because uh, because I've been sort of writing peer-reviewed papers for a long time, and of course, communication is an important skill that was very transferable here. So I think I'm running out of time. Um, could we quickly move to the next slide? These are some of the New York State specific resources. All these organizations are hiring and would love to have you if you'd like to work in the policy space. And I'm going to throw a couple of recent examples of some of the things that I've accomplished in New York State in the chat, so that I don't take more speaking time, and I will just stop.
Thank you, Anshul. Thank you so much for that. And please do raise your hand if you have questions. But I have to say, Anshul, that I was very inspired by your transition because a lot of friends I have who are kind of like at the retirement age say the climate is not going to affect them, so they don't have to do anything anymore because it's like down the road. So the fact that you like instead of choosing comfortable retirement, you decided to spend your time in and fight for climate change, that's really amazing. So thank you for choosing to retire in that way. It's really incredible. So we have a question for Varshika. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. I agree with Monica. Like it was an interesting transition coming from a big corporation to policy. Out of curiosity, I'm wondering, did you notice any sort of conflict of interest when you moved to this policy space? And what sort of, I guess, knowledge did you transition from the working in a big corporation towards government policy side?
Okay, so there would have been a conflict of interest if, for example, IBM was in the business of making heat pumps, which thankfully it is not. So there was no conflict of interest between decarbonizing New York State and high performance computing, which was my area. And what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, what sort of knowledge do you think was transferable from corporations towards the policy space?
Okay, so it was the knowledge was just being sort of mathematically and technically literate, and just understanding the physics of energy, and being able to communicate that to the policymakers in a language that they understand, because they are mostly lawyers. They don't work in that space, and they actually rely on technical information from experts. And usually what happens is that most of these so-called experts tend to come from the fossil fuel industry. And so it was good to be a sort of technically competent counterbalance to the fossil fuel industry's narrative that these people hear all the time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anshul, for being here. And please join him in the breakout room if you have additional questions. And let's welcome here Paul Himmelstein, who is an operations lead at Homeworld Collective, and he's calling from Oakland, California. Hey, Paul.
Oh, these were locked in. I changed my slides slightly. Cool. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Himmelstein. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the operations lead at Homeworld Collective. We are a nonprofit startup. So just a little bit about us really quick. If the last century in industry was based on the mechanical and the chemical, this upcoming century is the age of biology. Right, so your textiles, a lot of manufacturing, a lot of materials creation, a lot of environmental remediation are going to have biological solutions. And there are over like 100,000 biologists worldwide that are working primarily in health and pharma, and we want to mobilize them to work in climate. So we do that by research, identifying problems, strategically funding early experiments so that they can work on those problems, and then building the community for skill sharing and collaboration. I did not come from a science background. I didn't come from a tech background. My background for the last 10 years is political organizing, grassroots fundraising, early childhood education, nonprofit fundraising generally. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I engaged in a double pivot from both industry and role. Yeah. Well, actually, can you go back for a quick second? I want to point out a few of the trends that I was saying really quickly. Yeah, so a few things I just want to name about the trends in my industry as someone who is a generalist working in a highly specialized scientific field. AI is incredibly disruptive, and it can help you punch way above your weight. I made a spreadsheet that I could not have made 2 years ago because I was able to use AI effectively. It can really help you like trim the fat on your time and make you incredibly efficient. Managing a suite of specialist contractors, the intersection of social emotional intelligence and project management. SEL, social emotional intelligence, is like the key to like moving a team forward and to helping create and identify priorities. And the ability to like really clarify when visionaries and when technical people see a change in the world, but how to make that become reality. You can go to the next slide now. So I'm not going to speak about the intersection of biotech and climate. I'm going to speak about what it looks like for me to enter this space. So I had the double barrier of both lack of experience in an industry and lack of experience in my role. Additionally, I had the lack of access to the right people who would hire me. The way that I made that double pivot is one, and a lot of people have alluded to this, I consumed quality information. I inundated myself in learning. I built up my facility to speak to a wide variety of climate topics, but I also maintained my curiosity so that when I got excited about something, I could dig deeper. So I would encourage you really, like, what's exciting to you? I was really excited about like the fact that so much of our stuff is going to be made from like bioengineering and like reading sci-fi. I was like, wow, the future is going to be so wild. And so I allowed myself to follow that curiosity. What's your curiosity? I had a ton of informational interviews. A year ago, I didn't know that I was good at project management, but I talked to someone who I worked with and was like, what is this thing that I loved doing when we were working on our project together? And she said, you have a great natural aptitude for project management. And I was like, oh, that's incredible. Like, so like have informational interviews, follow up on the suggestions that those people say. And also like keep working on your narrative so you can stand confidently in what your transferable skill set is. In my transferable case, I had to take 10 disparate years of work and piece them together to end up in the senior leadership position I am as operations lead. And everyone said this, but network. And really upstream of networking is doing personal work, like making sure that you are aware of who you are, like how you want to be respected, how you want to show up for others. And that way, every networking opportunity will be more rich because you are more grounded in who you are and increasingly improving yourself. So I think I have a little bit of like, yeah, you can go to the next slide. Resources. So one, you should totally check out our newsletter. I'm going to drop it in the chat. Yeah, podcasts. I just inhaled Catalyst by Shale Khan. I would listen to it on the way to the coffee shop when I was biking or walking. I would listen to it while I was working, just getting that vernacular in your brain so that when you're at networking events, you can talk to people and like ask people pressing questions, and then hear them talk and gain the facility in those conversations. I did read Project Drawdown. I did read Ministry for the Future. I think it's good that there is some near future visioning, even if it's imperfect. Another way to do that is Autonomous by Annalee Newitz, specifically around biology. And then, yeah, in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see some emotional books and positioning yourself more in life generally. I really do think it's crucial to making sure that you're doing the best as possible for who you are. And yeah, last one, just potlucks with your friends. Okay, so I actually networked because a friend introduced me to someone. And like, really don't discount your personal network. Don't discount your extracurricular activities. You have a rich network, I'd imagine, and lean into it. Oh, hey, great. Yeah, thanks. And that's what I'll stop now.
Thank you so much. And I have to say that was when I was reading your application, it was great to hear about the self-reflection exercise that you have done, and like how do you move from nonprofit kind of work? Because myself, I work in nonprofit too, and I'm trying to find niche in climate, like where do you fit in, and doing this exercise of finding what skills could lead you to a climate job. So that was really great. And so please raise your hand if you have any questions, but I can start with one. I mean, you were able to manage to get a lot of informational interviews, and I'm just wondering, like, how, and I remember Laura mentioned that, like, how people now maybe are overwhelmed with so many people contacting and trying to get jobs. Like, do you have anything to share? How did you get to schedule so many of them?
Yeah, well, it took some time, right? I probably had those interviews over 4 months. I leaned into my personal network greatly. It was me reaching out to people I've known in past lives, people, yeah, so someone mentioned an alumni network. I reached into like my friends and community from my time at university, in my time since then, and just honestly reached out to everyone I knew and said, hey, I am engaging in a double pivot. This is what I'm curious about. Do you happen to know anyone? So I made a list of people I knew who worked in things I was curious. I was curious about finance. I was curious about sales. I was curious about operations. I was curious about HR. And people are really, the thing is that people really want to help. It like think about it. It feels good to help people. Like if someone asks you for help, you're like, oh yeah, I could totally connect you to a friend, right? And the thing about informational interviews is you're not going in with an agenda. You're not going in to try to get a job. You're going in to learn. And that's the distinction between that and an actual interview. And then at some point, people will be like, oh, actually, let me put you in touch with this other person. Let me put you in touch with this person. Yeah, and that's what happened.
Thank
And
you.
I did network into my job. I got two interviews out of 50 resume applications. I got screened out of both of them. I didn't even get past the screening interview. So it really is networking for me.
Cool. So we have a few questions. Rita, maybe you can go ahead and ask yours.
Yeah, of course. Hi, Paul. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, and thank you to the other speakers as well. It's been really interesting hearing different perspectives that everyone's taking on the climate action. Like you said, your background was in kind of political organizing. How have you seen that aligning with project management of more professionals versus looking at issues like equity and human rights?
Yeah, so I'd say the political organizing, it's really like the organizing piece is like calmness and chaos. So like knowing that like at some point you just realize that not everything is on fire. Like it's like the ability to like strip away and like know that you're not going to get everything done, because when you're like the fire hose of justice work, like you know you're not going to get everything done, and the only way you're able to stay in it for more than a few years is by being okay with that. And so the way that translates to project management is being able to clearly know what people can actually get done in 4 months and being able to strip down and find a critical path from that is one way I would think about it. I would say that my project management skill set largely comes from the fundraising side of nonprofit work, where because of this, how slow philanthropy works, you really have to project far in advance and do a lot of piecemeal building and like preparatory work so that people can trust you with their money. For anyone who works in nonprofits, you know that there's a wild power imbalance between funders and recipients, and it requires a lot of work to get there.
Thank you.
Did that answer?
Darshana, well, why don't you ask one more question? I think we have time.
Yeah, my question is, thank you for choosing me. My question is to Chen about SDG goals. So is he working on that, or he just gave as a resource, or what is he doing for SDG 17 goals for UN?
It sounds like that was a question for Lewis. Maybe
Yeah,
that.
Louis Chen.
Yeah, so maybe you can join the breakout room with Louis.
Oh,
and
I see. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem, no problem. Varshika, maybe if you have quick question.
Yes, thank you. Paul, I would love to hear your advice on a little bit about personal branding. How did you personally narrow down your search? Because as someone who wants to transition, there are enough of good resources, but I feel that they can be quite overwhelming at times because there's just so much information out there, all good information, but it can just be a lot at sometimes. So how do you advise on narrowing down what you like? How did you do it? And any advice on that?
Yeah. My main way I did it was when I dabbled with everything. I took a Coursera course on like the electrical grid. I was like, am I excited about this? I kind of was. And so I think a lot of my previous work, I was mobilized by what I felt like the world needed. And that's true, but it's like, what are you just uniquely excited about? Because when people get excited about something and they're good people, like that work becomes good work, largely. I know there's some exceptions, but like I would say largely that's a rule. And so the way that I did it is I just listened. I mean, like, I really can't emphasize the Catalyst podcast enough for like a broad view of climate tech specifically. Just, and then like, what are you stoked on? Are you like, oh my God, we need to 7x mineral extraction the next like 10 to 20 years in order to meet our electrification goals? That is fascinating. Are you like, wow, I can't believe that crypto and blockchain can be a solution to XYZ, like how exciting. I can't believe that we're gonna make our shirts out of seaweed in 20 years. Like how exciting. And so yeah, I'd say do that. And then at some point it is an opportunity. Like I feel like I'm really glad that I ended up in biotech. But there's a chance that I wouldn't have. There's a chance that I would have had to start in sales at a distributed energy resources company, you know? And then it's really about getting your foot in the door, and then knowing that what people kept telling me is like where you end up for 1 or 2 years is not predictive of where you'll be in 10 years. You just start and then you're able to like slide and like move and maneuver yourself. But those first 2 years, like get your foot in the door where you can, like take a small contract, like prove that you're good, like and then like stay curious and then like grow and like maybe do some extracurricular learning so that you can continue to like bolster in the place that you want to grow. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for those insightful strategies and for being here, Paul. And let's move on to our fifth speaker, Katrine Murupaenga-Ikenn, who is joining us from New Zealand, where she is a climate justice activist. Thank you for being here.
Kia ora. Thank you to the organisers of this event today. And it's been amazing listening to the previous speakers. As often happens, I have some speaking points to keep me on task. But here, my listening to everyone has given me a different perspective on actually what I want to say. So I might have to adjust what I'm about to say. So here's some background. So I'm from the Māori peoples of Aotearoa, the colonizer name, aka New Zealand, you might know it as. I come from the Te Rarawa Ngāti Kuri Māori peoples. I'm actually a grandmother, so that is an added motivation. If I wasn't, you know, compelled enough previously to do what I do as a defender, I'm super compelled now to, you know, continue this work with gusto. I do have some academic credentials, but look, these days I find that tertiary credentials are somewhat overrated, because life, you know, you can get a lot of experience now just from, you know, your direct work in society, in community, with people. I really want to reiterate relationships. We call it whanaungatanga, which is building relationships with people is like a superpower. I've got to say, pretty much all of the jobs, quote unquote jobs, that I've gotten in the climate space, I mean, it's obvious I grew up as a defender naturally in my community, so it's in our blood. But beyond that, to earn, I hate talking about it as earning a living, but you have to pay your bills. And that's one of the challenges of this work. We had, was it Anshul, you said this was your retirement plan, and you have to take a pay cut, he was mentioning. This is so true. One of the pieces of advice I would say to people is it's great if you can make a lot of money in this space, but there should be an expectation that you switch your values. The things that the marketplace values are not the things actually, when you get into this work, that are valued. Things that are valued in climate defense is like relationships, building trust, environmental, you know, protection and defense means that you have a different take on what nature is. It's not there to exploit, obviously. It's there to provide life to us. I'll move on to the next piece. Yeah, if you can keep going right to the end of the slide. Thank you. So you can see some of the, I've got a diverse group of campaigns and networks that I belong to. Again, it's because your interpersonal relationships are key to like moving in the climate space, and you want to follow your passions. Another, have a superpower of curiosity. Paul mentioned curiosity right at the end there. That is your superpower. Lean into what you're curious and follow your passions and your values. This is actually for me a spiritual game. We call it wairua. Our belief is that our ancestors and our, we call them atua, they are supernatural ancestors. They're actually, they have our back, and they're nudging you in a direction, and sometimes you can't see it. But 6 degrees of connection. You might go into a conversation with people thinking your mission is X. It actually turns out your mission is Y. or Z. So the universe it creates these scenarios where you go into a conversation thinking you're going to talk about a certain point. You're going to come out of that conversation saying, wow, I discovered something new, and it sets you on a different track. That's where you're meant to be. It's kind of, I don't want to say fatalistic. Can we move on to the next slide? I've got to really rush through this now. We were asked to give a quote about what's important to us. And the quote that I had was, it's about e harataku toa te tōtaki tahi, engari he tōtaki tini, which means it's not me alone where my strength comes from. It's actually about the multitudes. This is a game, a collective game, and we've got to think like a collective mind in getting these climate, solutions out there. Next slide, sorry. And I'll just really whiz through this. Yeah, so my journey has been, you draw on your origin story of who you are, your identities and your values, because in the defense game, it's really tough and it can be very isolating. You're going to have so many ups and downs, and you need something outside, bigger than you, to get through the despondency, because this can be quite a drag on your emotional state. This is a long game, and you've got to keep it up for the long game. Can you continue?
You must put
down
our
the slide,
energy to
thanks.
combine.
Yeah, there we go. Relationships, all your networks are most important. Yep, next one. Yeah, I had so many challenges in my life. Again, you want to just lean into, for us at least, it's our spiritual grounding that really gets us through those tough times. And the language that you say to yourself, because sometimes you're going to feel like it's only you who really understands why you do this. You must hold on to the why. You're here for a bigger reason than yourself. Next, keep going. Thanks. Yeah, challenging establishment narratives, and this is a big part of my job. Like, God bless people who want to get into tech. From an Indigenous defender point of view, high tech is creating vulnerability. Actually, there is not enough minerals and metals on the planet to actually roll out in an equitable way all of this tech. Nature's tech is the best, and it's not just about carbon, like credits and stuff like that. Restoring nature in her entirety is actually where we're going to get the rebalancing of the planet, and healing is really the name of the game. We'll go on to the last slide and I'll just round this up. Yeah, work is very giggy. I gotta say, you have to let go. You have to let go of this security thing. That's a big ego trip, but you've got to understand it's very variable. And the last slide, and I'll just leave the last slide. People can look at the last slide. I put some links in here about the different human rights standards, because that's the work, that's the grounding for my work. A lot of the conversation in politics and policy making and so-called solution design, they leave out human rights. That's the big flaw. So that's what I would advocate, is to understand human rights and have that be the keyhole that you look through all your solutions in, because without that, the world is going AWOL. Yeah, and just some networking kind of links there for people as well at the bottom there. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you, Katrine. Please raise your hand if you have questions. But Katrine, I mean, I really really love how you folded this environmental protection and climate crisis into your human rights movement with indigenous people who are stewards of the lands we have that we're trying to protect. So I was wondering if you at what point of time like you have seen that human rights is also so connected to climate crisis, and you decided to focus also on that, and did you see any resistance from your people moving to it, or maybe it was all natural? But for both
There
of
you
us.
go. Yeah, I got to say, maybe mine is one of the different journeys and tracks, because we were just born into the understanding. We don't call it human rights. It's just our, cultural values. We're part of nature. And I don't know if people notice, everywhere around the planet, when you see indigenous peoples are suffering, there's often, more likely than not, a correlation with the biodiversity, ecological destruction, and threat, and it goes hand in hand. So yeah, nature is more important than anything to protect, because it's actually what gives us life in the first place. Water security, the soil being healthy, the air that we breathe. It's economics is all based on there being a strong environment, so it's really got to be the first thing. I would say also the regulatory situation, laws and policies. Anshul talked about that. It's got to be a priority for people. If you want to get into an area, make sure your constitutional provisions, of your nation state puts the environment, health right at the top there, and human rights right at the top. And I would also argue for clarifying that corporations do not have, legal personality, any personality. They don't have rights superior to actual human beings in nature. That is so perverse. That's one of the problems that we have, is corporations have such strong rights that they trump actual people and communities in nature. It's just wrong. So yeah, that's the level of work that I operate at, not so much all this techie side of things. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is so important, climate justice and advocacy for people. It's amazing. And I remember you mentioned also in the application that like you've seen this paralyzing anxiety with people when they learn the truth about the climate crisis and the consequences of it, and that you were able to find like power within yourself to move people into action and hope with the actions they can take. So I appreciate for all the work you do and pushing people to action. So thank you so much. I think we're at the time we have to finish. As you've heard, there were amazing stories, each of them very different and very different perspective, and all of them so important. So we are so happy to see all those different perspectives. But before, we will be moving on to breakout rooms. But if you're leaving right now, please do a quick poll for us. How did you like the event? We would love the feedback. But if you are staying for the breakout room sessions, we will now divide all participants into 5 rooms, and each room will be named with the speaker name. So you can just yourself select which room you want to go. Speakers, please just choose the one with your name. That's how you would join your. And please feel free to run the breakout rooms in a way you feel proper. And also, audience, you can move from room to room, so feel free to move around as well. And our Work on Climate team will stay in here if you have technical issues or if you want to ask us questions. And we would like to invite you back at the end for 5 minutes wrap up as well. So thank you so much. And let's divide into more deep conversations within the rooms. Thank you.
I'm sorry. So what should I do? If I want to go somewhere, what is it that I have to do?
You just need to select which breakout room you want to go and see.
I know, but I don't have any